Hello, and welcome to another author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and tonight I'm delighted to have with us one of my favorite authors in person, Gigi Pandian.
Pandian, yes.
Pandian. Sorry about that. We practiced and I didn't get it right. Her new book is The Library Game, which is just out. Before we begin, for those tuning in virtually, the Poison Pen does have copies of Gigi's new book. We would be happy to hold one for you or send one in the mail. Just give us a call or go online to the Poison Pen Bookstore. Now I'd like to welcome Gigi.
Thanks, all.
My first question for you is, before you were a writer, you were a person. What is Gigi's origin story?
My writer origin story or
your human
human origin story. Okay, so I think that my human origin story and my writer origin story are probably the same thing.
Okay.
Because it never occurred to me that I could be a writer as a career until my 30s. But it was when I was 10 years old that I think all of the seeds were planted that meant that this had to be my fate. Both of my parents were cultural anthropologists before retiring, and I spent my childhood being dragged around on their research trips, doing different academic conventions and doing their book research when they did things, since I was an only child. So, and it was the summer when I was 10 years old that I was mature enough, apparently, that I could spend the whole summer with my mom in the Highlands of Scotland doing book research. She was updating one of her academic books. And so the seed was planted then about how amazing the world was, with all these ruined castles and windswept cliffs and legends about selkies and fairies and all of these different things. And then shortly after that, I was able to travel to India with my family. My dad is from South India, and that was a family trip compared to a research trip, but it wasn't long after that. And so the world just opened up to me, with so many, being born and raised in Southern California in a multicultural family, and it was just, that was life, but it was a very certain thing that I knew well, and then the world was opened up to me right at that age, and that's when I became an avid reader and an avid storyteller. And I think the die was cast from that moment for the things that were fulfilling for me as a human, and then that made me become a writer.
You actually went to school, though, for something else, didn't you?
I did. I really did. I don't know what I was doing. I guess from having academic parents, there's lots of pressure to go get your PhD right away. And I rebelled a little bit, and I ran away to London after college. And, you know, just to figure out what to do, and didn't apply to grad school for a couple of years. But then I did start a PhD doing something completely different, until I realized that writing about the fictional adventures of academics was much more fun than being one myself. But I did learn that exploring archives and libraries and getting to find all of the gems that the type of thing that you would never think to look up online or ask someone about, but that when you're there, you know, sniffing through archives that maybe no one has looked at in the longest time, it's amazing to find little things. But then what I found is I wanted to make up the stories about what I thought would be cool from that gem of information, not the reality that I would then go have to specialize it and figure out really what that meant. So I was not a good academic.
When did you decide to seriously pursue writing?
I don't know that I ever seriously pursued it, because it is such a fun thing that I also have trouble sticking to one thing. But I think that what actually got me to finish writing a book was when I discovered National Novel Writing Month, which is the challenge to write a 50,000 word novel, just a draft, in 30 days in November. It was started many years ago by some friends in the San Francisco Bay Area that they just said, we've always wanted to write a novel someday, and life is always busy, so it's really hard to do. And so they challenged each other to do it. And it was just a group of about 5 of them that first year. And then it started growing exponentially to a couple dozen people once their friends found out about it. And now there's like hundreds of thousands of people all around the world who do it, both as serious writers, but also just for fun to see if you can write a novel and try it. And there's a young writers program too. But I had just dabbled in storytelling of various kinds, writing. When I was younger, I would write and act in plays and little short films and things. And so I loved storytelling. But whenever I tried to write a novel and thought I had an idea for one, I would never finish it because the next shiny thing, it would be there to try out doing. But when I heard about the NaNoWriMo challenge, I actually finished writing a draft of the book that became my debut novel, Artifact. And it was not a good novel yet. But I was so excited to have finished writing something that I sent it off to the Malice Domestic Grants competition, which is a grant for unpublished traditional mystery writers. And it's to foster the next generation of traditional mystery writers. And I sent it off and promptly forgot all about it because I just wanted to do something to celebrate having finished the novel. And to my great surprise, I won their grant that year. And so that's the first thing, that combination of NaNoWriMo spurring me on to actually get to the words "the end" for the first time. And then getting the grant showed me that maybe I had some potential here. And so I decided that maybe I should take it a bit seriously. And I started, I went to a couple writing workshops and got writing craft books and got involved with my local Sisters in Crime chapter and found wonderful mentors. And it took a while, but that was the nudge, the combination of those two things.
Artifact was part of your first series, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
The Jaya Jones?
Yep.
And I see that particular character, there's a little bit of yourself in her, is there not?
Yes. So my mom is American and my dad is from South India. And I'm very tall. And so when I created a character, I wanted to have it be both truthful to my life experience so I could write it as best as I could, but also not get confused thinking I was Jaya. So Jaya is very short. She is barely 5 feet tall, and she has a mother from India and an American father, and many other differences. But I liked that I was able to have that part of her identity so that she had something about her height that she did feel strongly about. Like, I'm 6 feet tall if I wear heels, which I really love. But yeah, so she's very small and has that cultural experience. But that was just a jumping off point. I let her be an academic who had actually finished her PhD and was a professor. But her adventures that she gets to have as a historian are much more exciting than anything that I saw my parents get to do as academics or any of the historians that I saw doing research. I really wanted her to be a female Indiana Jones, but with my own twist that all of the books were related to treasures related to India's colonial history. And I actually, my mother had reminded me when I was working on that book that when I was in middle school, I had created a character called Minnesota Smith, who was a female Indiana Jones, who I was writing a comic strip about.
And you wrote several in that series,
Mm-hmm.
and then you started another series.
Yeah, the Accidental Alchemist Mysteries were kind of an accidental series that I didn't mean to write. I was still writing the Jaya Jones books, and it was actually right at the start of that series. I had only finished Artifact and had written a draft of Pirate Vishnu. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer right after my 36th birthday. And the characters in the Accidental Alchemist series were very subconscious manifestations of I was going through a year of chemotherapy. And so I found myself writing about a centuries old alchemist who had accidentally discovered the elixir of life. And so I was, thinking about chemotherapy that was saving my life, even though it was wreaking havoc on my body. And I've always loved gargoyles ever since that first summer when I was 10 years old and saw my first gargoyles. And I was really intrigued by them. And so I just wrote this gargoyle who was once stone but accidentally brought to life through alchemy. And writing that book was really more like therapy, that I just wanted to write something fun and whimsical and I'm not a big journaler, but I love to write characters to, just,
Explore.
yeah, and just play with things that I'm thinking about. And so I didn't think that would really become anything. But when I showed my agent my sample pages later, once I had cleaned them up, she absolutely loved it. And that was the series that ended up selling quickly, unlike my first one that nobody knew where it fit. And I don't know why a gargoyle fits better in mystery, but there was something that other people loved, Zoe and Dorian, which was a great surprise to me, but was wonderful because I get to still hang out with them too.
And now we come to your new book, The Library Game, which is part of your Secret Staircase series. Can you tell us how that came into being?
So I'm going to answer that question in two ways, because The Library Game, the book itself, came to be because it's my love letter to libraries and classic mystery fiction. And so it was a way for me to play with those two things I loved in this particular book. But the series as a whole came to be because I love classic mysteries, especially the golden age of detective fiction from about 100 years ago, when there were so many puzzle plot mysteries that were the fair play type of mystery where you as a reader got all the clues it could match wits with the detective. And my favorite kind were locked room mysteries, otherwise known as impossible crimes, where it's not even that there's a puzzle to solve. So it's not even the whodunit and howdunit, but how it could possibly have been rationally done, because it looks like it had to have been a supernatural hand, that it was a curse or a ghost or something. And those stories are just so much fun because you get not only the twisty puzzle, but you're also getting a gothic ghost story in the best type of ones. And so when I started out writing, I knew I wasn't a good enough writer to write that into a novel because they're a really complex type of puzzle. And so while I was writing my novels, which all of my novels are puzzle plots, I do really try to do that. So you could potentially solve the mystery in the books before my protagonist, but I hope you won't. But you could. But yeah, that I have to rely on my critique partners and my editor to make sure I get the balance right, that it's there, but I'm holding back. But so I was writing locked room mystery short stories to learn my craft and really how to do it. And it was so much fun. And I really I thought, oh, one day maybe I could pull it off in a novel. And then the idea for the Secret Staircase mysteries, I thought perfectly lent itself to being impossible crime stories, because I had written a locked room mystery short story with Tempest Raj, the main character in the Secret Staircase mysteries, and she is a stage illusionist. And in the golden age of detective fiction, there were lots more magician characters because as magicians, since they create the impossible, they're the perfect characters to see through the misdirection that someone who has created a seemingly impossible crime have created. And so I loved that idea, and I loved her in the short story. She was actually mentioned in a Jaya Jones novel as one of Sanjay, the Hindi Houdini's magician friends. And then I wrote a short story with her, and then she kept kind of coming and saying, hey, I would like something else. Give me some more stage time, please. And so I finally thought I was ready to do something bigger. And I wrote a standalone novel to try to tell her story about a family curse, which is the overarching mystery of the series. And I I tried to write it as a standalone, and I crammed so much into that book. It was terrible. It was so terrible. And it was a great learning experience to write it. I've never written a standalone. I have so much fun with my characters that I really want to spend more time with them. But so I tried to write her story as a standalone. It totally failed. And so it was at the beginning of the pandemic, when I was taking lots of walks in the hillside above my house, that I discovered that there was a hidden creek in the hill above my house, that I had lived there for a decade and had never found this. And I never knew it was there within a mile of my house. And it's not always there, because in Northern California, if it's not rainy season, then you won't see it. But I found this, and all of these houses, looking at them through the trees, I realized how I wanted to tell Tempest's story, that I was trying to make it more of a big thriller to tell this story. And I don't have a thriller voice. That is just not my voice. And I realized that the small town setting in a town that I named Hidden Creek, for this creek that I found, was the perfect setting. And instead of Tempest being a stage magician still, the impetus for the start of the story is her career has been sabotaged. And so she's moved back home to Hidden Creek to work for the family business. But the family business is pretty cool because it is secret staircase construction, building magic into people's homes through things like sliding bookcases that reveal hidden libraries. And it was really those walks at the start of the pandemic that made me realize the heart of the story and how I could tell the story of her family curse and the seemingly impossible crimes through that family business with this setting that was no longer beyond the scope of, it wasn't a thriller, and I was a strong enough writer that I could write the puzzle as a full-length novel. And it took a little while to, get it just right, but it was so fun that I actually managed to pull it off finally.
They are wonderfully fun.
Oh, thank you.
What can you tell us about the library game? Because Tempest's new commission is to help create a library.
Yes. So there is an old house in Hidden Creek that the owner was an elderly man who had collected classic detective fiction for his entire life and had this incredibly immense private library. And he couldn't find any libraries that wanted his collection whole, so he decided his legacy would be to convert his home into a community library that would be open to the public, but that the specialty would be classic detective fiction of all kinds. And so Secret Staircase Construction has been hired to turn the home into a proper library. And the library is about to open, and they decide to get some publicity for it, that they're going to participate in the Hidden Creek Summer Stroll. And so where local small businesses will do something special, to entice people to come and participate. And so Tempest and the crew create an escape room game on the second floor of the library, which is a literary themed escape room with all the classic mysteries up there. And then on the first floor, there's going to be a murder mystery dinner theater where actors will perform a little play, but all the audience will get to have drinks and participate in the interactive murder mystery. But when they're doing their last rehearsal with the actors, one of the actors is mysteriously murdered because it's a prop gun that they're using, which can't fire real bullets. So how does the actor get murdered? And more than that, the body vanishes, but the library is being watched the whole time. And so it is a doubly impossible crime. And who else but a former stage magician is the perfect one to figure out how. And what was really fun in this one, too, is that it's also a closed circle mystery, not just an impossible crime. So you know that one of the people in the library is the culprit. Or are they? perhaps it is Harold Gray, the elderly man who has recently passed away and leaving his home. Is it his ghost who is doing this and playing the games in the library?
It's wonderfully created, and I like that you make the distinction between closed circle and locked room, because a lot of times they're intertwined or mixed around, and they're not the same thing.
That is one of my pet peeves.
Yes.
That is the hill that I will die on. That a locked room mystery is when it is a truly impossible crime. It's not just when everyone is in a secluded location together. I love those mysteries, but they are not locked room mysteries. So if a bunch of characters are taken on a rickety boat out to a private island, and then the boat sinks, there's no other boats there, and they're all stranded on the island, that is a closed circle mystery. But if people start dying there in impossible ways, like if it snows and you see somebody walk out with into this and it stops snowing, so it's pristine snow, one of the people walks out through the snow and then are killed at close range, but there's no other footprints in the snow. That would then be an impossible crime. That is also a closed circle mystery. Which actually it's all Agatha Christie's fault, because And Then There Were None is both a closed circle mystery and a locked room mystery. So it's Agatha Christie's fault.
You have described your puzzle-centric new series as kind of gothic cozies. We'll discuss cozies, but what did you mean by that?
So this is something that there will probably be real gothic writers who will shake their fist at me for saying this, but gothic to me is an atmosphere that is created. And so if something has a certain atmosphere that evokes that type of, imagery, that's what I think of as gothic. So John Dixon Carr, for example, he was the master of the locked room mystery during the golden age of detective fiction. And what elevated his locked room mysteries was that he created a gothic atmosphere layered on top of an incredibly devious puzzle. And so you truly believed that it was a curse or a devil or a ghost that was haunting this creepy old house rather than a person who had just committed a devious crime. And so that atmosphere is one of the things that I love to try to play with, so that it's not just a puzzle, but you can really fall into what feels like that type of creepy gothic. So it's more of a vibe, I guess, in the way that I use the word. But again, if anybody here is a reader or writer of gothic mysteries with a capital G, you'll probably be shaking your fist at me here.
There's that hint of the supernatural to your books, the possibility that you kind of, by the end, you provide a rational reason for what's happened.
Or do I?
You never know.
No, I know. I mostly do.
do.
But then there's that tiny little hint. I like that tiny
Well,
hint.
John Dixon Carr did that too
Yes.
with a lot of his books.
Yes,
There was
yes.
one where there was this poisoning by this apparently famous French poisoner who had been dead for like 100 years, and was she reincarnated into this other woman, and you never really knew.
Yeah, that's one of my very favorites of all of his books. That inspired me to write my short story, The Locked Room Library, which was just meant to be a one-off short story, but the setting of the Locked Room Library in San Francisco made its way into my Secret Staircase Mysteries because it was just such a fun setting. It couldn't just be a one-off. This is why I can't write standalones, because I can't just, if I create something I love, I want to spend more time with it.
There seems to recently have been almost a renaissance of interest in mystery readers in traditional or fair play mysteries. For a while, it was all thrillers and suspense and Gone Girl and all that. But why do you think mystery readers like them? Why do you like traditional mysteries?
I love traditional fair play puzzle plot mysteries. I think there's so many layers of that, but I'm actually going to start with an answer that's a little bit adjacent to that, in that I think we're able to discover so many more of the great ones right now because so many books are coming back into print. And so lots of great books were out of print for so long that there's so many great small presses that are bringing those books back to life. And so we can find what we like in those things. And so there's lots of them reprints that have been unpublished for a long time that I'll read a little bit of and I'm like, nope, that's not for me. But then I'll find another one that I'm like, oh, this is great. And so I think that it is a lot, that there is so much more that people can and find them, in the availability. But I also think that they are so satisfying. In mysteries in general are really satisfying because you'll get resolution at the end, and that's not the case in all genres. And I don't always want resolution. Sometimes I might want to read something that has some ambiguous ending, but I want to know if I'm going to get that. If I'm reading a mystery, I want that resolution. And so puzzles are even deeper resolution, so you can have resolution on many different layers. And so it's just such fun also that you can be solving a puzzle and then you can wrap it up. And then if it's like great characters that you love as well. So it's just so many layers of it. But I really do think that with so many books being back in print, that we can find things that are great. And there's so many great gems that were lost that are now available.
Well, it's kind of a crossover too, because readers who like traditional fair play mysteries, there's also been this whole interest in, they also like crossword puzzles and now Myrtle and all these other things where you're kind of using that same skill set.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and escape rooms too. Escape rooms are big, and it was fun to write one of those into the book as well and think about what I wanted to do there.
Let's talk a little bit about writing series, because you've written several, including your Secret Staircase books. I'm imagining, not a writer myself, but that can be challenging, because how do you keep each book distinct in itself? How do you carry a thread through the whole thing? Do you find that sometimes you've written yourself into a corner when it comes to characters or their particular dilemmas?
I think the most challenging thing for me about a series is that I want each of the books to stand alone so that you can pick them up even if you haven't read the others. But I also want the characters to grow. I don't want them to be completely static. And so it is a balance of how much to get readers caught up on the lives of the characters and or just hit the ground running and let people get to know them. And so that to me is the biggest challenge, because each mystery definitely stands alone. And so I am crafting a new book from scratch. And I write on paper, and so I fill lots of notebooks before I even move to the computer. But I also, one of the ways that I try to keep things straight is that I write in a program called Scrivener. I can't write in Word. And so I write in paper notebooks, and then I work in Scrivener, which is a way of having all of these different subfolders. And you can have these, for each chapter or scene, there's little note cards that you can make look like paper note cards. So you can write notes about each scene that you're writing. So you have the prose that you're writing, but then you can also write your little notes that you would have on a note card, that these are the main things that happen. And there's ways to you can put in pictures of characters, so you can find actors who you might want to, your characters to, be, so that you can keep them straight and write your little character bios. But then the challenge is, if you change those things like early on, then you have to remember to update everything. So editors are amazing humans for helping with all of that.
Does writing a mystery make it easier because it's a very traditional format structure kind of story, or is it more challenging for you because you have to come up with those clues, you have to know where to plant them, you have to come up with alibis and false suspects?
I've never written anything that wasn't a mystery, and so I don't know if it's more or less difficult, but it's so much fun coming up with clues and all of these things, because I love reading it. I love reading mysteries, and I read them so widely. So I love the convention, and I want to stick to it. And I don't do it as a conscious thing. It's more that I love the story structure of mysteries, and so those are the natural beats that I do. And when I was when I was finishing that first novel that I had written for NaNoWriMo, when I took a writing, there was one writing workshop I took in particular that looked at film compared to books and how they have the same story structure and looking at the beats. And I realized then that I wasn't following a formula when I wrote that first novel, but I just naturally had the beats of my favorite movies, because also that summer that I was 10 was also the same time that The Goonies and Romancing the Stone came out. So it was all the perfect storm for all of the great adventures. But the story structure of movies is the same beats as when you're writing at least like mystery type of books. And I had subconsciously written all of those beats except one that I was missing. And when I wrote that in, I put that in, and that's when I got my agent. Wow. And so that was, it really helped me see. And there's so many different ways that people write and learn, but that for me was what made it click. Yeah.
Do you always know in your mystery who's done it? Or do you sometimes surprised and say that person couldn't have done it, I have to restructure the story?
I only a couple books ago realized that I had been wrong about the killer in every book. And which blew my mind when I realized it, because I do think I'm an outliner, because I do spend so much time in those paper notebooks, working things out. And then I'll, write up an outline, and then I'll start transcribing, because some of it is, just brainstorming in the books, but some of it is actually going to make its way into the books. But once I do that, I think I know, but I don't, because as soon as I really start writing the characters, they do what they want to do. But I do think that it is, I do think I have a wonderful subconscious, though, because when I've realized who really did it, I don't have very much to change. Wow. Because I think I knew somewhere, even though I didn't get it in my outline, I think I knew.
You're kind of subconsciously just writing what you needed into the story.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Gigi as a reader, because you're a writer, but you're also a reader, I know. And I didn't think I could love you and your books more until I discovered your favorite author is Elizabeth Peters. And this was the book that kind of was your benchmark?
Yes, Borrower of the Night. That was the gateway drug into knowing I would do this. Borrower of the Night is her less famous sleuth, Vicky Bliss, who's an American historian who goes on globe-trotting humorous adventure mysteries with romance. And so very much like my Jaya characters that I wanted to put my own spin on, making my Indian American Vicky Bliss, who had, Indiana Jones tendencies and got to have, lots of adventures. But yeah, the Vicky Bliss books were the first books that I was truly obsessed with, I think. And Elizabeth Peters how many books has she even written?
I think over 40, maybe 50.
Yeah.
There's a lot. She's writing for like
40 because I have 2 bookshelves that are filled with her books. But those just really, again, I found them at the right time. That I think I was about 15 years old when I discovered Borrower of the Night. And it was like the next nudge of like, oh, there are mysteries that have all of these great adventures, like the stories that I, did when I was, imagined when I was 10. And her books are the books that I can reread again and again. There's just something in an author's voice. And so one of the challenging things, I think, when we talk about favorite authors and favorite books is so much of the time we talk about this is the plot of a book, but there really is an author's voice, and that's the thing that grabs you, and that's the thing that's amorphous that you can't really explain. And so even though my 3 series they have overlapping elements, but they're so different from each other, but they're all very much my voice, which is the reason that my standalone version of Tempest Raja's story didn't work, was that I was trying to shoehorn it into a voice that wasn't mine. And I thought that, I mean, it wasn't wasted time because it was a great learning experience, but I really thought I could do something else. And I can't run away from my voice. I can tell different stories, but I can't change my voice. And Elizabeth Peters will always be the most amazing author with her voice. And yeah, I can. So here's a tip: if anyone is ever having a bad day, whoever your favorite author is, just read 2 or 3 pages of one of their books, and you will instantly be feeling better. Like my copy of Borrower of the Night looks nothing like this pristine copy. It's like barely hanging together. And I met her once before she passed away, and I had her sign my beaten up copy of Borrower of the Night. But I don't want to keep it pristine. Like, I want that to be my beloved book. Like, I don't want it to be just on a
shelf somewhere.
Yeah, I don't want it to be in plastic.
Yeah. How would you describe your voice? I think there's some humor to it.
Yeah, it's maybe light-hearted, cozy-ish gothic humor. I don't know. It's just all the words but see, all the words strung together become meaningless if you just put all of them together. But I don't know. Same with Elizabeth Peters' voice. I don't know exactly how to describe it.
There's kind of an acerbic in a good way.
Oh,
sense
yes.
of humor.
Yes.
There's always a little bit of romance to almost everything she's written.
But see, that's what I'm saying, though, that like when I describe her books to people, I say that it has the adventure and mystery and romance and like those. I feel like she's greater than the sum of those parts. So
there was also the hint of supernatural to
Yeah.
many of her books.
yeah.
There's an appreciation for people despite their flaws.
Mm.
She sees people for who they are, and it doesn't always surprise her.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, and there are so many lines of her books that characters that have said certain things in dialogue that just stick with you forever. And that's actually one of the things that I didn't realize readers would email me about as well, that sometimes they would tag me in like a post online where there's just a line of that I've written in a book, which is really cool because I don't really think of I think of myself much more as a storyteller than a writer, because I want I want you to be carried through the story by the characters and what's happening. I don't want to dwell on beautiful language. There are lots of books that I will read for the beautiful language, but that's not my books. I want the language to be invisible and to have you. Yeah. And so when people do that, I'm like, oh, that is a nice line, but I didn't remember writing that, and I did. So again, I think my subconscious, it's a nice subconscious. Thank you, subconscious.
Does your love of classic mysteries extend to what you watch on the big screen or small screen?
I don't watch very much TV or movies because there are so many great books. And so I find if I'm going to watch something, then it has to be something that my husband and I both agree on. And so we have such a small overlap. And so I think Only Murders in the Building was the last thing that we both really loved. And that was fantastic. And so I do think that is in line with my reading taste. But and I do like periodically subscribe to Acorn or Masterpiece Mystery PBS. But then when he doesn't want to watch with me, then I'm like, okay, I'd rather be reading a book. So
well, you do have another passion besides writing and reading, and that's food. And that comes up in your books.
Yes.
And on your website.
Yes. And I will say, too, so I'll talk about my foodie character in The Secret Staircase Mysteries is Tempest's father, her grandpa, Ash. And most of my characters are not based on just one person. But when I started writing her grandfather, he really is my dad. And he's the type of person that if you come by the house, he will insist on feeding you all the things. And if he meets you somewhere else that is not his house, he will know your life story in 5 minutes of meeting you. He's just that guy. And so he was such a fun character to write because I do him so lovingly, but he is such a character that I don't have to poke fun at him at all because he's such a character that is like that. And so it's really fun to get to have him as a character because he's about to celebrate his 90th birthday, and we're going up to celebrate with him. So yeah, so it's been really fun to get to immortalize him in these books. And I never planned to write a real character into any of the stories, but he doesn't give me the recipes for the books though, because he feeds people. So he's not exactly Grandpa Ash, because my father used to cook a lot, but now will just feed you all of the things that he'll get. But he doesn't spend all the time baking right now. But I love cooking, and so culinary mysteries are a way to spend time with characters because the food and family and friendship that are wrapped up in the books is just, I like writing books about characters that you want to be friends with. And so I feel like food is such a wonderful way for everyone to come together. And I love eating and cooking. And so it's fun I have an excuse that I have to recipe test.
You've written a number of books now. What have you discovered about writing, about publishing, that you wish you could go back in time and tell yourself this is what you need to know?
I wish I hadn't worried so much about every step, because when I was a new author, I think I felt I had to do everything all at once. And it's okay to learn and grow and not feel the need to be working constantly. And I think that it actually has helped me grow as a writer to give myself the space to figure it out. Like, for example, that failed thriller that I wrote. If I had tried that even a couple years before I did, I could see myself being so angry at the wasted time. But at the time that I did it, I really learned a lot from it, even though that book is never going to see the light of day. There's a few there's elements of it that then made its way into the Secret Staircase Mysteries, but the prose itself that I wrote, like, that is just, that's not a thing. Nobody needs to read that. It is bad. But it was a wonderful learning experience, and I wish I could have taken things that from the beginning of my writing journey, that also knowing that it was a learning experience, and you don't have to do it all or do it all perfectly all at once.
I know that the library game is just out, and you can say as much or as little about this next question as you'd like, but what can we expect from you next?
So I'm alternating series right now. That's how I keep my ideas fresh, that when I'm working on the hard parts of one book in one series, I can look at the light at the end of the tunnel that, I get to work on the next book, which is something different, which is easy, because before you're working on a book, it of course is easy. And so I am working on the next Accidental Alchemist novel, which is A Gargoyle's Guide to Murder. And so that one is my most humorous mystery series, the Accidental Alchemist mysteries. And I'll also, I think I'll do, I'll share something here that I haven't shared publicly yet, but people, if they're my readers, they will know this, but they won't know what I'm doing with it. Is that this year is the 10th anniversary of when my Accidental Alchemist novels began. So The Accidental Alchemist came out 10 years ago. And I thought it would be fun to celebrate that 10th anniversary. So I'm actually working on creating some beautiful character art from that series. So there's going to be a 10th anniversary special edition of that book that has some gorgeous artwork. And so details will be forthcoming, but that is something that is also in the works.
It's kind of interesting that your Gargoyle series 10 years ago, some people looked askance at any inclusion of other genres, other elements in mysteries, but now it's suddenly the flavor of the month.
Except I've also heard because cozy fantasy is something that people want, so like low stakes fantasy, so that you can have escape with fantasy characters, but without having to cover your eyes and having all of those things. But I do have some stakes. Even though they're cozy fantasy mysteries, there are some stakes, and so I wonder if it's too much stakes. Because I didn't write them to be a certain genre. I just, wrote them. Yeah. But I am actually finding a lot more readers for that series now. So I think that people have realized that it is fun to have fantasy elements. So yeah, so that series is growing now too.
They're kind of the peanut butter cup mysteries or books of your writing.
Yes.
There's chocolate and peanut butter.
Yes.
I think we have time for questions. Any questions for Gigi?
I have a couple that are probably pretty quick. One, did your dad recognize himself in the book?
Okay, so the question is if my dad recognized himself in the book. And I told him actually as soon as I realized it, so it didn't get to be a mystery for him. And he was very happy. Yeah.
And then the other question is, do you know what happened to Minnesota Smith?
Oh, no. So I don't know what happened to the Minnesota Smith comics. I don't know. But my parents also never throw anything away. And so it might be there, like in the garage somewhere in one of those boxes.
So we may find out someday.
Yeah. So Minnesota Smith may make a reappearance.
Other questions?
I just want to say I always
Sure.
love the titles and the covers, and I know it varies who has how much influence on them, but they're always beautiful and the titles are great.
Oh, thank you. Titles are difficult, and I didn't title the. Let me see, which ones did I? I came up with the titles, I think, for half of the books in the Secret Staircase series, but not all of them, because they're very much like a group, like trying out what works. But the library game was the one that was my first working title. And I didn't know if I would get to keep it, but I loved it. And so I was so glad that when it was like sent around to the team at Minotaur Books, they gave it a thumbs up. So yeah.
So how, when writing the series, have you handled or are you deciding to handle the character arc between like individual books versus like the whole series? And do you have like in your mind like, okay, this is going to be like a 7-book series or something like that?
Right. So how to handle the character arc within books and the whole series. And that is such a hard question because I'm a combination of an outliner and an intuitive writer that just, since I had mentioned that I never know who done it, even though I think I did, there are some things I know and some things I don't know. And so with the Secret Staircase mysteries, each of the books does stand alone, but there's actually the mystery of the family curse. It is not a spoiler to say that there is a closure of that at the end of book 3. And so I find that that's something I like to do that other authors do too in a long running series, is that there can be 3-book story arcs so that each book stands alone, but that there can also be like 3-book story arcs. And I did this with my Accidental Alchemist mysteries as well, that there's 8 books in that series so far, but there was an initial 3-book arc, and then I was able to do other things from there. And then there's a couple other books that are tied together, but I didn't do it in a completely organized way because the characters also grow. And then I'm like, oh, it's time they want to get back to this story now that was mentioned that, could just be a throwaway thing for character depth, or maybe we get to explore it more later. And so I love giving characters that flexibility to be able to grow. But I did plan the terrible thriller version of Tempest Story where I tried to put everything into one book. there is an arc of the first 3 books in the series that goes deeper into that does resolve after 3 books, but yet each of those books is its own mystery and its own puzzle that stands alone. So again, the having fun playing with those layers. But I'm not organized enough to really plan it out, but I do try to give the characters enough of their story that I can see what they want to do later on.
Patrick, did you have something?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions from our online viewers. One of them is, have you visited any of the world's great libraries, and are there any that really stand out?
So one of the fun things that I got to do when I got the Malice Domestic grant is that they give you some money to finish writing the book, either if that means taking writing workshops or doing research. And so being a research nerd, I used it. I went to England and Scotland, and I got myself a reader's pass to the British Library. And that was an amazing experience to look at all of the historical documents and manuscripts and things that they had at the British Library. So that one was amazing. And then I also went up to the Highlands of Scotland for where my fictitious archaeological dig took place there. But yeah, the British Library. I've been to some other libraries that have a more, I guess, mysterious vibe, but that was the one where I got to go do the in-depth research and, with the reader's pass in the reading room. So that made it really special.
Let's see. Here's a kind of a random one. Have you ever participated in a murder mystery dinner?
Okay. Have I ever participated in a murder mystery dinner? That was one of the things that I used to like to write. So I have written murder mystery dinners, and I started doing this when I was in middle school. Again, long before I knew I could actually finish a whole novel, when I used to write small plays and things, I did murder mystery dinners. And you will appreciate this, in high school, I made a pyramid out of cardboard that was like 6 feet tall that I spray painted gold in homage to Amelia Peabody. Yep, for one of the dinners.
You've actually answered this partly, but who are some of your favorite fictional detectives?
Okay, favorite fictional detectives. So Vicky Bliss is, absolutely one of my favorites. So the Elizabeth Peters character. So I was never a huge Poirot fan until I started writing my Accidental Alchemist mysteries. And then Dorian, the gargoyle, decided that he was a modern day Poirot, which I hadn't planned on, but he told me that he was. And so I said, really? And then I read some more Poirot, and then I'm more fond of him now.
He grows on you.
He does grow on you. And so I'm really happy about that. And I am a fan of Sherlock Holmes, but I'm not a Sherlockian. So I don't think I can really call myself a fan of Sherlock Holmes. But I really love that there are so many authors that play with Sherlock and in so many different creative ways. And so I would never do that because I'm not really a Sherlockian. But but it's so fun to read all of the different envisionings of that. And then I will also say one of my current favorite detectives is Jessica Blackwood in Andrew Mayne's thrillers. So she is a female magician. Well, she is from a family of magicians, and she was a magician turned FBI agent. And I love the author's story that he is a magician from a family of FBI agents. And so he gets it right. And those are fantastic books.
I guess the last one is, do you do magic, or do you know how to do magic?
Okay. I know a lot about magic, but it takes a lot of time to practice to get magic right so that you're not revealing it. Like, it is so much skill. And I know magicians, and I love going to magic. I'm lucky that I've gotten invited to the Magic Castle several times. That I've gotten to go there. That's the Magician's Playhouse in Los Angeles. So I've gotten to see fantastic magic, and I am involved in some like in my local magic club, and to be able to learn about magic. And I am indebted to the magicians who make sure that I don't cross the line of revealing too much of magician secrets. That I want to be able to, magicians can do one type of trick with so many different methods. So I want to make sure that I'm creating on paper something that is not revealing other people's secrets, but is getting at the spirit of being able to do magic. And it's been really cool to hear from magicians who I don't know as well that I really get it right in these books, which has been wonderful. I was nervous because I had showed it to magicians I know, but you never know if they're if they're just being kind. I mean, I would think that they would be honest, with me about it, but it's good to know that, so.
I think that's it, unless we have any other questions. Gigi? No. I'd like to thank Gigi for coming and being with us today. A virtual audience and present audience, thank you for joining us for another author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore.
Thank you so much for having me, everyone. Thanks.
If you give us a minute, we'll get her set up to sign books at the table here. We've got copies up front if you need them.